evening. This is Paranormal Science Lab Live. I'm Lisa.
I'm Duckface.
And this is Duckface.
I'm John.
I think it's Duckface tonight.
Duckface.
And we're glad for everyone to be with us. Thanks for tuning in. Feel free to give us questions in the chat room. And we are very pleased to have as our guest Nate Riddle. Nate is a researcher and author out of Texas, and he's written on the subject of hauntings, ghosts, and UFOs. How are you doing, Nate?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Anybody else hear that?
Are you still there, Nate?
Yep, I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So how are you doing this evening?
Great, thanks, y'all. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, we're glad to have you on, and we're kind of interested tonight in let's start off with the subject of UFOs.
Sure.
That's your newest book, is that right?
Yeah, I had a book here, Lone Star Saucers. It just released probably about a month and a half ago, so it's pretty new and out online and in stores.
And so anyone who's interested in picking that up, where's the best place to go to?
You can get it at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and then if you have a favorite bookstore, I'm sure they can order it for you there too.
Awesome, awesome. Did you have a question?
My question was, I've never seen you with such a small notepad. That's really not a question, more of a statement. But
it's what I had available.
Did you forget your legal pad today?
Yes, I did. Well, actually, I ran out of paper.
A lawyer without a legal pad.
Well, I ran out of paper. I did not put a new one in, so I'm making do.
The very small. The notes she makes during a show will fill up that entire small notebook.
Nothing like a critic.
Just saying. I've got to go find my aluminum foil before the aliens read my mind.
Okay. I think John's going to get prepared in case the aliens are tuning in tonight. Nate, I think it's great. Usually with our guests, it's rare that we have a guest that bridges the two between ghost hunting and UFO research, and so we're really pleased to have you on board. And you may be grateful right now that you aren't watching this on Skype.
I protected myself from aliens.
And your offspring too.
Hey, oh.
Okay, so okay.
Oh, it looks like the chat room, it looks like they're saying they're having a problem with the sound for some reason.
Sounds like we do and broadcasting, but they're not hearing it, Eric. That's the problem.
Let's try it one more time. We can hear each other, but apparently... Okay, he's restarting.
Restarting.
We should stay on, Nate, but Eric's restarting.
The trials and tribulations of live shows.
It always keeps it interesting.
Bad start. We should have sent it and say, try refreshing the page. I don't think that's going to work, Eric. Everybody's having an issue.
Well, if they're not hearing it, there's nothing I can do about it because we're broadcasting it.
It's the aliens, people, I'm telling you.
Okay, I think they're trying refreshing now, so
we'll just go on.
And so now, is this an alien helmet, or are you trying to be a Viking now?
Oh, I don't know. I think a Viking alien helmet would be cool.
Okay.
But you don't like it?
No, it actually looks good on you, which is the scary part.
It looks like it should be there, right?
Yeah, that's the scary part.
Yeah. There you go.
Now we'll get serious, Nate.
No, we won't.
No, you're fine.
What got you into UFO researching?
I don't know. I think I started, with ghosts and hauntings, and I always just kind of loved supernatural topics and the paranormal in general. And I, after the first book, kind of came out and got some good feedback on it, I thought, it'd be interesting to kind of go in a different direction and try to look into kind of a different, mystery in a different topical area. And UFOs is just kind of the next one where I think a lot of people, they just inherently are really curious about it. Some people are like totally into it, just like ghosts and haunted places. And then others are, for some reason it seems like maybe UFOs are more, quote, scientific. And so they kind of have this sense that, maybe there's a little more, a little more to it, and maybe that they're a little more willing to kind of, find out what's really going on with UFOs. And so I thought it was kind of the next logical step for me.
Well, I know we've had this discussion before that it seems like if science is going to come up with proof of a paranormal phenomena, it's more likely to be aliens and UFOs than ghosts. And so I think that's why people gravitate to it. What do you find is the differences between UFO researching and ghost hunting?
It's just a lot broader, I think. When you really look into haunted places, there's usually kind of a location or just an area that you can focus on. So I think from that perspective, it's easier to kind of get your arms around it. It's this building or it's this, spot or area. And then usually there's a lot of history to hauntings. So over the years, people have, really, specific experiences. Either they say they see something or they hear things. So there's lots of different, items to kind of start to key in on a little bit. And with UFOs, it's just so much bigger. People anywhere in the U.S. or anywhere in the world, they could say, I saw some bright lights here in Texas, and they could be, let's say, in Dallas, Texas, and the light that they're seeing or whatever phenomena it is that they're reporting could be 30, 50 miles away. And so it's a much more fleeting kind of phenomenon. It's interesting because a lot of people see things that, we don't necessarily, most people just don't have have radar available at home. So it's really hard for them to do anything other than get kind of a quick, camera image or video. And so I think it's harder to track down and it's harder to kind of find someone that, for whatever reason, even though people seem a little more open about UFOs, it's harder to find someone who's seen one, it seems. But ghosts, people don't seem to take as seriously, but more, the more people you talk to, most people say they had a creepy experience. So they both kind of are inverse of each other, I think, when it kind of comes to that.
I actually saw UFOs when I was a kid. I lived out on a farm out in Oklahoma, and I used to lay on the back of my dad's truck and just watch them zoom by all the time. And it was pretty interesting. I mean, the way that they were moving, and I'm sure you know this, obviously it wasn't an airplane or a satellite or anything like that. So it was just kind of neat to see that much activity in the sky when people on Earth are kind of like, some people don't even believe it, I mean, how can you not, is my question. But
yeah. And I think there's kind of, there's like maybe a little more distance to UFOs. When you think of ghosts, a lot of people think it's either some psychic type of phenomenon that people, kind of generate, or it's an experience, or energy trapped in an area that's replaying, or, they think it's, actually a spirit, or some type of entity or intelligent being. And usually it's something that's human, so it was a person who passed away there or someone who died tragically. But with UFOs, it's always, I don't know who's piloting them, or if they're human, or they from, this time, this dimension. And so it seems like it's less personal. I guess people can kind of distance themselves and more objectively think of UFOs as being something that's hard and physical. You could go out, reach out and touch it because it's a true spacecraft or something. And ghosts, it's a little more, I think with ghosts and haunted places, it's more of a person and a feeling, and, there's some context there that people can kind of grasp on. And I think, both of them, whenever anyone has a genuine experience, I think, it definitely takes them, aback, and they're not really prepared for how to make them feel. But for some reason, I think UFOs, it's a little harder to kind of reach out.
Oh, I think we're finally getting things going, baby. Maybe. Oh, yeah, we got a video.
Okay.
So I guess I've seen a lot of pictures on the internet, and I think we all have, and a lot of video that's crap. Do you actually have actual evidence of UFOs?
Yeah, I think in the course of writing the books, and both of them, and definitely this latest one, I went looking out for anything that was seemed to be more solid, or at least it was harder to just disprove out of hand or say there's nothing to this. Was kind of the way I approached each book, and I think it's hard for anyone to prove something. It's also as difficult, if not more so, to disprove something or say something's not possible. And with UFOs, I kind of wanted to really focus on unidentified flying objects. That was kind of the first part. When you say UFOs, a lot of times people instantly start thinking of, Ridley Scott movies, Aliens, and they start thinking of Independence Day and Little Green Men and X-Files. And so UFOs carry with it a lot of baggage, for better or worse, that people are just really steeped in, that culturally, at least in the States, people just know, oh, well, if you say UFO, they instantly start thinking of, probing and cows being sucked up into flying saucers and things like that. And so I really wanted to just try to make the book be about, it's something that's flying that people continue to see and report sightings on, and how do we know that continues? And so really the book, a lot of it, goes kind of into the history of sightings, and in Texas that goes back to the late 1800s, where people were seeing, all sorts of, flying ships or airships that they reported at the time, and it's continued through to this day. And what's interesting is, at least in one case, and that case is the Stephenville sightings here that happened here in the early 2000s. There was significant sightings and eyewitness accounts that were reported through MUFON and other places, other organizations. But what was really interesting is that particular sighting and that wave of sightings, the researchers that were leading that effort at the time were able to get really good radar data that suggested that there was some type of flying object. It was large. It was in the same direction, moving in the direction that eyewitnesses claimed that they had seen it during the times that they made their reports. But then on top of that, they were able to really kind of look at multiple different reporting stations and have validated data from multiple different sources over a period of at least an hour, if not longer. And so I think there you start looking at that sort of data and go, okay, something's flying. Could it just be a light plane? Could it be a helicopter or something like that? And just in the States, and particularly after 9/11, you can't really have a commercial or otherwise aircraft. You can't have a military aircraft even flying above the skies without knowing that it's got a black box, it's beaconing, it's saying, here's who I am and here's what's going on. And so at the time they have George W. Bush, kind of down, at his ranch here in Texas and this, moving around in proximity of basically the Texas White House, and no one knew what it was or, who it was or who was piloting it, I think is interesting. And you look at that sort of data and you say, I'm not saying it's from a different dimension, but whatever it was, it's something that we can monitor. And apparently it was something that was moving very quickly and went along with eyewitness reports. To me, I don't know what it's evidence of other than there was an object that was flying that didn't appear to be any known aircraft.
What was that? The airship? Is it in the late 1890s? Was it that incident? Yeah. And I know it was seen over a very wide area too. Actually, before planes were invented. Is that correct? If I recall correct?
Yeah, it was interesting, and there's a lot of different books on it, and I really tried to kind of cobble together kind of the best timeline that I could to really give people a sense of, what was happening. But in kind of April and May of 1897, there really started to be a series of sightings kind of farther out west in the Sacramento, California area. And over time, these sightings seemed to persist kind of eastward. And in Texas, it was, there were all sorts of different reports, and what's interesting is when you go back to some of these old newspaper archives, like the Dallas Morning News and things like that, you really see that people, have all sorts of things that they saw. It was, a ball, or it was a disc. Some people, it had bat wings, like wings, kind of probably this Leonardo da Vinci kind of idea of a flying vessel. Some said it was steam powered, others it was electrically powered. A lot of people described a really bright light on the front of it, like a searchlight, and at least in some of those instances said that it was brighter than 4 or so train headlights combined, just kind of looking over the landscape as it passed over. So whatever it was is definitely something that you'd have to say, like today's UFO reports, some of it was probably genuine sightings of something. And then the others, just like with the internet today, there's instantly everyone saw something and everyone wanted to get their name in the newspaper. And certain people even at the time, they wanted to submit letters to the editor, just so they could continue to fan the flames of this, kind of wild story. So I think there's definitely something that was happening at the time. It doesn't seem coincidental that there was this rash of sightings across the U.S. over a very specific time period. But what is interesting is that across, those several weeks, it seemed to be fairly consistent, and then you can almost kind of see some of the ones that are a little bit too crazy, where the alien beings, they touched down in a field, they got out, they were men, they spoke English, they were smoking cigars. And you look at some of those, and it's really hard to know what to think of them, and you can't throw any of it out. You can't throw all of it out, otherwise you don't have anything left. So, but it is interesting that going back even that far, and to your point, before we really knew about airplanes, there were balloons and things like that at the time. But for people to really get excited and it to be kind of a citywide thing, across the state, is something pretty impressive, and especially knowing that people didn't really have the internet or, quick ways of communicating this. It just kind of moved as this phenomenon kind of went.
Well, yeah, you didn't even have instant communication with newspapers or anything generally then. Even though you had the telegraph, it was sporadic what got picked up. Am I correct? That's also a story where that's an early claim of that there might have been an alien body.
Yeah, there was actually a story, and it's famous here in Texas. There's this very small town, Aurora, Texas, and during the same wave of UFO sightings, I think this one actually happened in April, there was a report that a UFO or some type of flying airship flew in overhead, and then crashed into a kind of a windmill or large structure there, kind of over a well in town at this Judge Proctor's land, and took this tower down and crashed, and that there's this kind of aluminum debris all over the place, and one of the locals there, who is actually a poet and writer, he S.E. Hayden, he actually wrote this small article that said, basically this UFO flashed in, this airship, it crashed into this windmill, it burst into flames, and everyone came, to the aid of this little, this crash. And when they got there, there was this, diminutive little man, and there was this kind of hieroglyphical writing on, the remnants of this plane or spaceship, and that they buried him in the town cemetery, and that everyone was going to have a service, within the next day or two. So this was printed or reprinted in the Dallas Morning News a couple days later. But going back and doing the research for the book, I started really looking into others that were, around and, knew someone at the time, and just through the generations have had these stories. And really it turned out that it sounded like a lot of people who lived in town during that time period that were children, even that, by the 1970s when they were interviewed, or, certainly getting on up in age, that they remembered it, and they don't remember that crash ever taking place. And so what's interesting is when I looked into that a bit more, you could tell that the town had had, several years of bad luck. A railroad didn't end up coming through the town. They really didn't have, good luck when it came to, just kind of being able to stay a stable city. They had fire that took out a lot of the town, had boll weevil infestation, and they were really on their last legs. And so I think the more that I looked into that story, it was interesting that it seemed that maybe it was one of those that it was written just, for being sensational, and maybe it would draw some tourism and some folks out there. So I don't know how real that one is, and there's never really been any solid proof about it. But what's interesting is that was one article written, over 100 years ago, and to this day, I know there are still people that they make the drive out to Aurora, and they're out in the cemetery looking for the headstone of the crashed alien.
Yeah, I think it wasn't MUFON that actually went out there and investigated, and then it had been removed or something. I think I've read that before.
Yep.
Yeah. And I've in different reading, I've read that there is a concentration of
trailer parks in alien sightings.
That could be, because
just throwing that out there.
In a band across the United States, on either side of the 37th parallel, that goes through Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, even into our area in southern Missouri. But that band goes clear across the country, and there's a concentration of sightings. So perhaps you're right, John.
I'm just saying. Actually, Eric said it. I was just throwing it back out there.
Eric, you are a rabble rouser.
What do you think about the Bermuda Triangle? Do you think that has any anything to do with alien activity?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that first part?
Yeah, do you think the Bermuda Triangle has any sort of alien activity or portal that has something to do with alien activity?
I don't really know. I mean, that's another one of those topics. I always liked the Bermuda Triangle, and there's been so many books and documentaries written about it and done over the years. And I definitely think there's something going on there. Just, I don't know if it's geologically or from a climate standpoint, where they know researchers have taken planes out into that area in ships, and they recognize that, hey, there are rogue waves that can come out that literally will sink a massive ship instantly, take it straight to the bottom. Same with planes. They'll get out there and see that they have very unusual equipment readings, and that it's highly possible for even experienced pilots to get really turned around in that area and have to ditch in the water. And I mean, for that alone, I think it's definitely the area itself has some properties that typically you're not finding, all over the world. And you always hear of ley lines and other places that are special or have unique properties. But I mean, definitely, I think there's something unique about the area. I don't know if it's UFOs necessarily, but I think it's something that, whether there are UFOs there or not, there's some phenomena that we haven't really fully been able to explain yet that's causing a lot of these disappearances over the years.
Well, I know a lot of people are really talking about the USOs, the submerged objects that people are citing coming from underwater, like underwater bases for UFOs.
Oh, aliens have been living in the center of the Earth forever. Ever.
Tunnel to the center.
Tunnel to the center. There's not really a core in there.
No, it's a myth, right?
It is entirely a myth. It's a whole another universe.
Yeah, no iron.
There's nothing. Just
Put your tinfoil hat back on. Nate, what would you say is one of the more credible modern UFO experiences that you've written about?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, in Texas, we've got the Gulf of Mexico there. I didn't come across a lot of USOs. I definitely read a lot about them over time. Jacques Vallée did a lot of, great legwork in trying to pull together just sightings from all over the world, and several of them do, originate underwater, where, vessels are, out sailing and they see a light kind of out, on the horizon or something coming from up below, and then a light, kind of lifting out of the ocean and just taking off. But I think those are a little more rare, and I don't know if it's just that there's less people that are really out there to see them. That would be my thought is, there are definitely a lot of people out there that are fishermen and things like that, but there's so many more of us here on land, obviously, that we're probably just going to notice, UFOs than USOs. But no, I think it's the hollow earth, idea. That's another thing that I've been interested in and kind of looked into. And what's funny is, even when you take some of these ideas and you say, well, is there really like this empty center of the earth where, everyone's naked and happy and there's oceans down there and, they have this bright sun as a core in the center of the earth? You hear those things and it sounds crazy, and then you always have someone that, they go to Google Earth and they go, okay, well, this one part of the North Pole is obscured by Google, and it's probably because they're hiding this massive entry into the, the center of the Earth, and it's a big conspiracy with the government and Google. And it's the same with, is it Siberia, that here in the last, month or so, they've had these massive 50-foot wide, 300-foot deep sinkholes just appear out in the middle of nowhere. And you hear those things, and people have photos, and they get out there and perfectly formed, cylinder, tunnels straight down in the middle of nowhere. And I think those types of stories over time and those weird, kind of Earth occurrences, it takes something that, you might not give any stock to, and makes you go, okay, well, that is weird. Why are those things happening? And so it makes people more curious than anything, I think.
Well, that's true. Of course, we grew up in an area that was the world's largest zinc and lead mining area in the world, so we're used to sinkholes opening up.
And twitches and extra arms and stuff. Look at Bailey.
He said he was going to get you on the show one way or another. She's sitting here shaking her head. What is some of the most credible evidence that you've seen, Nate?
For me, I think anyone who's gone out and been interested in ghost hunting, for example, there's a lot of hotels, and I'm sure Missouri's got them too, where, everyone knows about it. There's some team that's out there constantly, every weekend, any full moon, they're completely packed, and, you can go in to check in, and it's not uncommon now to see someone walk by with an EMF detector and, their digital camera and all this stuff. And I think, TVs definitely make ghost hunting that sort of thing, right? There's this appeal that it's just this grassroots, anyone can do it, anyone can go out there and do it. And typically, even really good investigative teams who, they're very down to earth, they're really trying to look for anything that can say this is probably not genuine, or we should, not count this as something unusual. They've come across some case, and usually it's either a private residence, which that has its own pitfalls too, where there are people that, for whatever reasons, either they want attention, or, they might have psychological, issues, disorders going on that feed into, what they're reporting. I think every investigator has done it long enough. They've gone out and they've had some occurrence that they really couldn't explain, that really either excited them or kind of scared them a little bit when they got close to it, and whatever that is. And I think for me, my books are really interview-based. And so I go out and cast a wide net. When I start researching for them, I look for all sorts of people. People with Facebook pages, people with blogs, people who have teams. With UFOs, here I reached out to Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who's a former Apollo 14 astronaut, the MUFON team. And at a point, you just start letting all of this info come in as a writer, and you just try to kind of sift through what sounds too good to be true, what sounds almost kind of flat, like, oh, that's kind of interesting, but it's not really exciting. And somehow you just kind of tune in to people who at least seem like they really are passionate about it, and they don't seem a little too odd, like they, one of the gentlemen that I interviewed for this book was Steve Hudgens, and he's involved really, really heavily with MUFON efforts in Texas. And he goes, it's the UFO test. If you walk into a person's house and you look at their bookshelves and things in the house, if you just see a ton of UFO posters and a ton of videos and a lot of books on UFOs, that this person's probably already prone to looking for it wherever they, are kind of venturing out. And the same goes for haunted places. Someone who does nothing but watch horror films and all they do is read horror fiction and things like that. Typically, they're going to be a little more prone to just being interested and gravitating towards that sound was the ghost of the dead man that was here. And so I always look for someone who, in a longer one-on-one interview and on-site visits, it really comes across as genuine. And I've been lucky with both books where, here with UFOs, I met a pilot who's kind of from the Central Texas area that was there during the Stephenville sightings. And, and he said, I've never been interested in UFOs, and I've never seen one before this, and I thought people who had, were drinking a little too much or, or smoking a little something they shouldn't be. And but when I saw this and had my experience that one night, he's like, it was amazing. It was terrifying. It was, I don't know, I couldn't sleep for several weeks after it. It really upset me that there was something like that overhead, that, moving that quickly, that was completely silent, that we had, F-16 fighter jets chasing after it, and they couldn't even come close to it. And I guess it really started making me wonder as a pilot, like, how do you go that fast? Like, you can't have a human pilot flying and not, there's no way they should be able to survive that type of flight. And to him, it really astounded him. And what was interesting is after the fact, I asked him, it's like, well, do you consider yourself spiritual? He said, yeah, I was brought up Christian and was brought up Southern Baptist here in Texas, and I told my pastor, I told him what I saw, and he said, I don't know what to tell you other than I believe you. And he's like, I've never seen anything since, but I know that there's something else out there. It was kind of eye-opening in some way. And so to me, I think people always are kind of the best evidence. They let you kind of ask questions, and you can kind of relive it as best you can. And it's great for skeptics to have video or audio. But typically, even that is going to be something that someone's always going to say, well, it's not perfect, And so I really think it's people learning from others and sharing their stories. That's the best evidence, and that's what keeps people interested and curious about researching both of those topics.
Well, you pretty much answered my question with that. I mean, I'm sure you probably saw the chat room question about what tools do you use when you go out to an investigation. Are there specific tools, or is it more, just mainly cameras and stuff like that?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, for me, I never really wanted to have my own team. I didn't, go out writing the book to say, hey, I'm the expert on investigations or equipment. I was lucky enough to find a couple of local teams that do go out there and some really good, genuine, folks that they were like, hey, we've done this a lot of times. We don't have anything come out of it other than it was kind of fun seeing some friends on a weekend, And so it seemed like they had really good intentions for going out and doing it. They were doing the right things, like pre-screening, people, and whether it was businesses or private individuals, with multiple rounds of interviews and things like that, to really try to make sure that they were going out for the right reasons. They weren't going out to get their own TV show or anything. They were really there because they were interested and because they thought they could help someone just better understand, or at least not be afraid of whatever might be happening. And so to me, I mean, I think I'm probably familiar with most of the folks, listening in today, with the different types of tools and equipment, but it's not something that I've, decided to be a perfect investigator or have my own weekend, investigations on site. I've been a part of them over time, and I know some people that still do that I try to keep in touch with, but for the most part, I leave that to the people who are really die hard about it, because it's more than anything, it's a lot of work.
Oh yeah, I certainly agree with you there. Do you think that there's still more of a stigma against those who are looking for UFOs versus ghosts, because there hasn't been as much media coverage taking it seriously as there has been in the last 10 years with the paranormal shows focusing on ghost hunting?
I think with UFOs, I honestly kind of believe that it's probably much more accepted, and just kind of people are just broadly kind of more aware of UFOs even than ghosts. And I think it's because the media and especially like just kind of the entertainment industry just continues to churn out things about it, So, every couple of years, there's going to be a big sci-fi movie. There's always going to be a new TV series or mini-series, and the same with the paranormal. But I think the main thing is for people who really are believers or they're interested in it, I think there's just a difference in how you have to kind of look at it. When I started writing about ghosts, for example, I had a lot of friends that were just kind of like, well, one, you're not really a writer if you haven't done anything before. And two, why ghosts? That seems silly. I don't believe in ghosts. And I was like, well, that's the point of the book, is to bring people who do believe and those who don't along for the ride and let them, both kind of make up their own minds about what they're willing to believe in and what they're not. And so for me, I think it's just kind of how you carry yourself, I think there's a lot of people that are just going to tease you if you're kind of like, hey, I'm going out for Saturday night, we're doing an overnight investigation. And if you're really saying, hey, we're taking our flashlights and sleeping bags and we're just going to go hang out, it doesn't lend itself to being taken very seriously. It's really kind of adventures at that point. But if you're like, no, I really put my time and effort into this, I have a site, I'm constantly interviewing people, there's a lot of different, footage and personal time that I put into this, I think people understand at that point that it's a little more than just a hobby. It's something that you are passionate about and knowledgeable about. And so the same goes with UFOs. I mean, if you wear a tinfoil hat and you kind of just go to conventions dressed up as aliens and things like that, you're not going to get taken seriously. And so I find the people that are most interested in the paranormal are typically, when you meet them, they seem like the most mundane person you'll ever meet. They've gone through and there's a hat. They've gone through, they've done lots of video and audio analysis. They've read a lot. They've met a lot of people. And those people, I think, they know it's inherently going to be a topic that most people just aren't going to take seriously. And so when they find out that you're genuinely interested and passionate and they're able to kind of share with you, you realize like how really geared towards just getting new information these people are and sharing that information. And to me, that's the best part.
So you're saying that we're mundane, is what you're...
Yeah.
Well, and I don't know that anyone's ever said that about John.
Either that or we're not paranormal investigators.
A paradox. He's presented us with a paradox.
Well, it's like anything, right?
And then Doc Martin boots.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're nice.
Yeah. I like that.
Hey,
anything else, but I think I went in, when I went to college, I studied anthropology, and I wanted to go into archaeology. And everyone who thinks archaeology is neat, they usually think it's Indiana Jones with a whip and a hat and giant boulders chasing you. And I think it's the same with the paranormal, whether it's ghosts or UFOs. People have just been conditioned to think because of TV and movies that it's, hey, I'm going to go out with a night vision, camera, and we're going to get on four-wheelers, and we're going to chase down those UFOs, or we're going to, lace the whole place with FLIR cameras and have a team of 20 of us watching for anything. And a lot of times you go to these sites and you realize, like, there's probably something that's going on here, but we were here for 14 hours straight with multiple cameras, and we've done 2 weeks of analysis, and the only thing we heard was someone's stomach grumbling in the night, so...
Yeah, we can relate.
Yeah, been there on that before.
and they don't think about people that just jump into paranormal investigation of any sort don't think about repercussion. And there's more to it than just a camera and out playing around and pissing off ghosts. Because, you start pissing them off and they start retaliating and you really got issues at that point. But...
Yeah, and I think it's important to be respectful regardless. I actually posted on my Facebook page here not too long ago someone who, again, they were kind of fly-by-night or just, they were kind of interested in a self-styled expert, air quotes, on demonic activity and, and hauntings. And so, a man reached out to him. He didn't know where to look. He just happened to find him online. Guy came out and he was like, what's wrong? And this person was just, a little shaken, like there's some weird stuff in the house, but by the time the guy had left, with no proof, obviously, suddenly there were 9 demons in the house, and this guy, he couldn't move because they were attached to him, and now you had someone who, I'm not saying that person has no insight or no knowledge, but there's a way to share that information. I mean, if you really think you walk into a house and you're a seasoned paranormal investigator, and I think that's the key, seasoned, or experienced. There's no expert to it. I think you walk in and you really feel something is really happening. you want to take into account who that client is, how are you going to share this info, what are you going to suggest as next steps. But if you're someone that just walks in and, after 2 hours of being in a house, that you're telling them, they need to, get rid of the Ouija boards and they're, going to be stalked by a 9-foot-tall demon the rest of their days. Even if it is true, you're not doing anything to help calm that person and give them an answer.
You're
and
not
I think that's
doing them any
something.
favors.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Crazy people.
we tend to refer to investigators like that, and that there are a lot of adrenaline junkies that they get into it because they watch certain shows or movies and they think, wow, this is a thrill, and that's the downside of the media coverage, is there's been more people, I think, get into it. I agree with you. It's more of a problem when you're dealing with private residences, because you have to use some common sense and judgment dealing with people, and that doesn't always happen. And we've seen them end up contacting us after they've been through other investigators, and it's not always pleasant what they've been through.
Sure.
So I have a question in the chat room here, Nate. Do you think that our first contact is going to be more like Mars attacks or more like Close Encounters? Yes, that was an error question.
I thought I would hope Close Encounters if I were able to pick between the two. What's interesting, though, is I've in the course of writing this book, I think most people have said we've already been visited. Has it been disclosed? Is it broadly known? And everyone's just like, oh yeah, here's what UFOs are, and here's who they are, and what they want. But no, I think we probably most likely have been visited just for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And what's interesting, is when you think back to, these different civilizations that have, massive civilizations that have come and gone. And I'm sure they had their own technology, their own belief systems. They had their own experiences about the world around them, and a lot of that's gone. And so I think it's really possible you go back and look over recorded time, and people were seeing UFOs, and thought they were dragons, but they were seeing something hundreds of years ago. And so I think it's always something that's there. It's part of our existence, and we maybe now more than ever are just able to communicate faster and more globally, and just really want an answer. It's like, hey, this is happening all over the place, so what is it? And especially here in the States, in Western cultures, everything's really scientifically driven. So if we feel like we caught something on camera, or we got evidence of something, it's kind of it's in our nature to just say, let's get an answer to it. Because I think a lot of things about people is a lot of people don't like the unknown, right? They want an answer to everything, and so UFOs and ghosts are perfect for that, and I think that's what keeps people going, is just, hey, there's something that keeps happening, and we need an answer to it, and so let's get out there and find out what that is.
Well, I mean, just like there are tales of hauntings and ghosts that go back to the earliest recorded history, there are events that seem to be of UFOs. Some of the very early tests from India and the Middle East, as well as carvings from Latin America, very depict events that are more reminiscent of spaceships or high-powered aircraft than demons or dragons, etc. So I think we tend to dismiss those accounts because we distance ourselves from our ancestors and say, well, we're smarter, we have better technology. They just didn't know what they were seeing, and so they were making, interpreting it in ways that it had to be something else. And but we ignore the fact that these people were just as smart as us. We just have a little different understanding and technology now, but it doesn't mean that they made up everything that they wrote about.
Right, and I think like the Egyptian pyramids, and honestly pyramids all over the world. That's another one of those you go, okay, these civilizations were, quote, ancient and not nearly as technologically advanced as we are today, but we can't exactly recreate how they built these structures or why exactly, or at least if you say, well, we know how they built them, it took them, 200 years to build it. You go, well, why would they take 200 years? I mean, you think how hard it is, at least in Texas, to get a highway built. Like, how are you going to spend 200 years building this?
Same thing here, too.
Yeah, but then I think what's interesting is, and this is maybe, I'm not ready to give Ancient Aliens as a TV show or anything a lot of good credit here, but I think when you look at and you start realizing that, hey, the placement and the size of these, different structures, when you start looking actually mapped to different things, astrologically, I think that's where you start going, okay, they were really, this ancient group of people who had no great, grasp on science and technology like we do today. But at the same time, they were able to build these massive structures, and they could perfectly align them with solstices and the stars and things like that. And you just wonder, well, why would they do that? And I think to not have an answer to that, to me, is still something that science typically kind of brushes it off. Well, like, we're looking into it. Archaeologists are looking into it. But I think from my perspective, I always thought it was more interesting to say, let's not look at just a singular line of view, right? And that's, how do humans do this? It's, how did this get here, whether it's human or not? Why is it here, whether it's human or not? And if we think it's humans, well, let's put evidence up against it that says, here's how they did it and why. And I think that's the missing part on a lot of these, archaeological mysteries is, why did they do it? What happened to it? How did they, fall apart? And what are we to take from that? I don't see humans building pyramids today, unless it's, Elixir out in Vegas or something like that. So clearly it was important at a time that on a massive scale, civilizations got behind it. And today, for whatever reason, we've lost that and that answer. And I think that's still interesting to go after.
I think that's, I agree with you there. And I know recently there's been more of a discussion. You've had scientists come out on different sides on this topic. I know Stephen Hawking has recently come out and said that he fears the day that we do make contact because we're likely not to come out of it very well. And of course, if you look at our own behavior on our own planet, we tend to be aggressive and subjugate other people. So I think that is one thing that drives interest too. Is it's that primal fear of encountering someone that might be more intelligent, have more technology that we can't deal with.
Right. And what's interesting to me is, we mentioned the airships, and that's 1800s, but one of the more interesting studies, in different, there's a couple of books about it, and then it's mentioned in a lot of places, but I never really saw a lot of in-depth detail about it, was the sightings at Fatima in Portugal, and that was the early 1900s, where there was supposedly, these three children, came across this, being. They said it was the Virgin Mother Mary, and that she appeared to them, and normally that would be like some kid saw a ghost in the backyard or something today. But what was interesting is, again, you go back pre-internet, here it is that no one was looking for this, and the lens that was put on it was it's very spiritual, it's a kind of a Catholic spin on this event. But, literally they had hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people, descend on Fatima. And in pouring rain, said that they saw something that, to this day, I don't know how any scientist can accurately explain what it is they said they saw and say it was natural phenomenon. They said they saw the sun dance, and that the sun itself, or something as large and as bright as the sun, danced all over the sky. It terrified people for, hundreds of miles could see this occurrence, and that it flew so close to the ground and to the earth that people who had been standing in the rain soaked were instantly dried because of the heat emitted from this object. And to me, that's the early 1900s, and that was something that was considered a spiritual event that even the Catholic Church at the time recognized several years later as being, quote, a miracle. And today you say, how would we even explain that scientifically? And I don't see anyone saying, well, here's the answer. They go, oh, what's interesting is this and that, but we know it can't be because the sun, if we back up in time, the sun was actually here. So that's not, it wasn't the sun. And I think there's a lot of skeptics that they just look to say, here's what we do have, and they try to dismiss or just brush over what is a real looming question. And that to me is definitely one of them. And that's a great example. And you go even to the last 5 or so years, and the Catholic chief astronomer came out and said, hey, we need to with open arms be ready to meet our space brothers and sisters. And here, even in this past year, NASA has come out and said, hey, just based on the technology that we have, we will discover intelligent life within the next 20 years. And I think, Roswell happened in 47, and here we are, and we still don't know that much more about it. But I think it's bolder now that you're seeing some of these groups and organizations come out publicly and say, get ready because it's going to happen. It's not if or should it. It's we will find it. It is something that is on the horizon.
Well, yeah, I think statistically with the number of planets and stars.
I'm excited.
Well, I am too. I think it is a matter of time, and some of these civilizations could be millions or even billions of years older than we are. And if we look at where we're at now, and basically civilization started about 10,000 years ago, they think, or maybe a little longer. And where we're at now, where we could be in a million years, that's what what you're dealing with. And I just think it's very fascinating. I think, it could happen tomorrow, or it might be 100 years, but eventually I think it's going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
We're getting close. We're getting close to the end of the show, Nate.
2 minutes left here.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about, something real, perhaps your favorite part of your book that's on ghosts of Texas, so that people can get an idea if they want to go out and buy that one. We haven't talked about it much.
Sure, yeah. The first book's called Star Spooks, and that one, again, it's really interview-based, and I think it kind of goes, across the board and gets to kind of go into some interesting ideas. If I had one or two, I think my favorite was my wife is definitely the skeptic in our household. She doesn't really subscribe to any of, the paranormal being possible. She didn't say it's impossible. But as part of that book, I took her to a really famous haunted location in Texas, the Menger Hotel in San Antonio, and it's just right across the street there from the Alamo. And we were able to stay in kind of the more active rooms in the hotel, and by the end of the weekend, I wouldn't say she saw an apparition or anything, but she was definitely unsettled and just very creeped out by the room and the vibe, and just there's something off about this place. And I thought that was interesting, is that, you can have someone who, quote, doesn't believe in ghosts, and so, but it's funny because you take them to a haunted place and they don't really buy into any of it, but they end up having unusual feelings or experiences that they can't explain. And if readers get a hold of that one, I think they'll see what I mean. But it was definitely fun to kind of bring the skeptic along who's just like, oh, there's nothing to it. And by the end of that trip, have them, come out saying, I'm not saying they're ghosts, I'm saying I wouldn't stay there by myself at night ever again. So I thought that was, and the other part I tried, I didn't have as much luck with the second book, Finding a Skeptic, but I did interview at length a skeptic. There's the editor of the Skeptical Inquirer is a man named Ben Radford. And Ben does a lot of work all over the paranormal map, from ghosts, UFOs, cryptozoology. And Ben was really great about providing, here's the skeptical question. If someone says, hey, I got a great EVP. Well, what are you really recording, and do you know how you're recording it? I
hate to cut you off, Nate. We're just about to our end of the time, but I'm really enjoying the conversation. But
No, thank you.
Eric gets angry if we go long.
so yeah, he beats us.
Beats us.
So,
Horribly.
but maybe we can have you back another time and continue the discussion. I really enjoyed it. We encourage everyone to check out Nate's books. If you're not in the Texas area where they're in local bookstores, go on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, etc., and order them. Nate Riddle, he's got 2 great books out. Hopefully there's more. We sure appreciate you coming on, Nate.
Thanks, Nate.
Hey, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And everybody stay tuned for Selena Roman and Closer to Death. She's got teal gray. Have fun.